Hello! Welcome to episode 2 of Tea Time Med Chats. So in this episode we will be looking at the internship application process, which a lot of you will be thinking about. So Minji, do you want to tell us about today's tea and today's snacks?
Yep, today's tea is... Wait, what's today's tea?
It's, I think, a sweet dew with wild pear.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, you can actually taste the pear. It's
It looks
sweet.
like almost transparent, like you can't tell there's tea in here, but then it has such a strong taste. And we've got some... Can you describe these desserts to us, Minji?
Yep. These are Korean strawberries and they're very, very good in winter time. We got some snacks for us from... it's called 이웃집 통통이. That's what the bakery is called. It's a bakery that I've been interested in for many years, so I'm very glad that I got them. So these are financiers, and this one is like cheese sticks. They're like crackers.
Okay, so we'll be nibbling on these throughout the episode. Sorry to make you jealous, guys. Today we're going to be talking about everything internship, and Minji here is just starting to think about the internship application process, her own application. Meanwhile, I completed the process last year, so I'll be giving my reflection and insight on the whole process. And usual disclaimer, this is just what information we have to the best of our knowledge. So if you get told something differently by the PMCV or your university, please do listen to them.
Before we go into what you recommend for internship, can you tell us about where you'll end up and how your process was?
Yes, so this year in 2023, I'm going to be interning at Alfred Health, which was my first preference out of 8 which I submitted. So obviously quite happy. So everything just worked out, and of course, Alfred is just such an excellent hospital as well. So I'm very excited.
Okay, well, congratulations, Richard.
Thank you.
So now can you tell us about the internship process?
Yes, so in terms of the application, the whole thing is pretty much coordinated by the PMCV, which I think stands for the Postgraduate Medical Council of Victoria. So the intern application process is shared between PMCV and then the hospitals themselves, which means that some components are common and core that PMCV coordinates, such as the CV, the references, and the standardized centralized interview, but then the hospital can also request other things. So what that means is there are some specific, clearly demarcated components to it. One, there's the PMCV curriculum vitae that every hospital gets, that everyone does, uses the same template. There is also the 3 video interviews, which is again seen by every single hospital. And then there's references as well, so 2 clinical references, and that goes with your CV. I should have mentioned that earlier. And then there's also the hospital specific thing, so a cover letter that you need to send to pretty much every hospital that you apply for. The hospital themselves might ask for additional things, so they might ask additional questions in their own application and also ask you to do their own set of interviews.
Right, okay. So that actually sounds like a lot of work. And when did you start preparing for all of this?
So you can start thinking about it even now. I would say January is a pretty good time to start thinking about it, just because there's so much that you need to worry about, like the CV, the cover letter, and you don't want to overwhelm yourself or stress yourself out too much. So I think now is definitely a good time just to, for example, look at some blank templates, like the blank CV template. You can ask some current interns and PGY2s for their cover letters, just so you get an idea. Just think about who you are, your achievements, what you've done, your journey so far, your own brand, and just start, I guess, conceptualizing and mind mapping these sorts of things. And it's also good to start asking references about now as well, or thinking about who your references are, because you don't really want to be chasing them up like in the weeks or even the month leading up to it, because you know how people are with emails and phone calls, they're not always timely. So just getting a really good picture of what you need to do and the timeline as well of when everything is due. And then a few months later, I think around like April, May, I think that's when you can really dig your heels in and start, actually preparing, practicing interviews and writing your CV.
Right, okay.
According to the PMCV website, which I was looking at a few days ago, the internship applications open on the 8th of May and they close on the 8th of June. So if you're watching this video in January, you've got about 4 months till they open, and then you've got 1 month to submit it. And you can submit it anytime you want in between the 8th of May to the 8th of June. But then from then on, it needs to be done.
Okay, so now can you go into more details about CV?
Yes, so there is a centralized PMCV. CV, that's yeah, so that means that everyone fills in the exact same template and the hospital sees the exact same things from everyone. So you can't really like go on Canva and design one yourself or make it pretty or aesthetic. And every single section is the same for everyone as well. And you can actually find it online now, which is really good because it means you can look at it now and see exactly where you're deficient and where you can, you know, sign up for extra activities and do those things, and where you're strong.
What kind of components are there for the CV?
Yeah, so in terms of the components of the CV, the front page is your basic details. So I'm not going to go over that. That's like address, like your name, your date of birth, that sort of thing. And then from then on, it goes into your education. So your secondary education, your tertiary education, your clinical placements, and so on and so forth. So for this section, my advice would be tertiary education, you definitely can put in some things to differentiate yourself. So any other additional qualifications you've done, it doesn't necessarily have to just be Doctor of Medicine. So if you've done any like professional development courses, like any like RACGP courses, RANDS COG courses, or just anything additional that have earned you a qualification, don't be afraid to put it here because it does give you that like extra boost. But I also wouldn't say that it's like a make or break, like a crucial component. So yeah, you definitely can spice it up a little, but not too much. Like I wouldn't go overboard. Secondary education, I like wouldn't really bother with. It's just your high school. And then clinical placement, I'd say the number one thing to worry about with clinical placement is to be very complete and comprehensive, but also very efficient. And that all comes down to formatting and the way that you type things out. So you want to save as much space as possible with these 3 areas, whilst also, I guess, being as complete as possible. So I would definitely say which hospitals you went to, like which rotations you had, how many weeks you spent in these rotations, because hospitals do like to see it. So I wouldn't skip it. It's not unimportant, but it's not the most important.
Right, okay.
So after clinical placement, that's when it goes into things like your employment history and volunteering history. And now this is just something that some people will have things and other people won't. If I had to give one piece of advice for this section is that don't be too factual with this section. And what I mean by that is, you need to be accurate, of course, but I wouldn't just describe everything too like robotically. So for example, if you worked in retail, I wouldn't just say like, oh, I folded clothes, like I delivered coffees, I did that. I would say a little bit about the skills you gained. So for example, did you have to be really vibrant? Did you have to be really confident? Did you work in a stressful situation? So kind of hint at why your experience in volunteering or employment would make you a good intern. But at the same time, it can't be too fancy and too descriptive without any substance either. So you can't just say like, I became the best this and that or whatever. It's kind of like, you hint at it and you make yourself look really good whilst still describing the tasks you completed.
Right, okay. So employment history is actually quite important then.
Yeah, even if it's not related to medicine, definitely include it. Okay, even if you've worked in McDonald's, and that obviously has nothing to do with being a doctor, but guess what? It shows that you've worked in a team. It shows that you know how like paychecks and timeliness and being punctual works. You know how to report incidents, you know OH&S rules, that sort of thing. So why not put it there? So it's a really good section, and I think any employer loves seeing a complete a complete work history, and volunteering is good as well.
Okay, so a lot of like transferable skills.
Yes, that's exactly what I would describe it as.
Right.
The other thing that I would say for this section is that you can expand on certain things if this is one of those areas where you don't have a lot of things. So for example, if you haven't volunteered a lot, which I know some people will fall into that category, then that's when you can talk about things like, you know, teddy bear hospitals. But if this is something that you're very strong in and you have a lot of things to write about, then I would say that you really do need to prioritize what you expand on. And that's actually really good general advice for your CV in general, is that your CV needs to be really balanced. So you can't have a volunteering history that's like that long and then your research and publications is like that much. So if you haven't volunteered a lot, feel free to talk about what you did for Teddy Bear Hospital. But at the end of the day, you need to keep in mind that like the vast majority of people will put Teddy Bear Hospital on your CV. So it's not really a differentiating thing. So if you've got a lot, then just like put one line in it and then just move on. The other section is the awards section. And again, this is just something like you may or may not have it. And it's just unfortunate because you can't really just like get one just because you want to. And the other thing is it doesn't have to be related to medicine. So for example, if you've got a sporting award, if you've got a music award, a community award, something that you receive for volunteering for 5 years or something, then definitely put that there. It doesn't have to be medical. I think if you've got a sporting award or a musical award, it shows that you're a really well-rounded person, that you know how to allocate time to your hobbies and look after yourself, so why not?
Okay.
And it just makes you interesting.
Yeah.
And it makes you stand out. And then another section is the research section. And the good thing is you can also in this section, it doesn't have to be a publication. So it can also be something that you're just working on and that you intend to publish as well. So if you've got just projects in the background, just feel free to put them in. Any like journal club presentations, any conference presentations. If you really rack your brain, I think most people will be able to say something, even if it's not like a published manuscript. And in this section, it also says, I think like events or just presentations, I think it was. So just, even if it's not a medical presentation, if you presented something somewhere, like you gave a speech at something, then feel free to put it in.
Right, okay. And I also heard that you can like add attending a conference as well, like a medical conference.
You can, and that's probably applicable because you're all still medical students, but I would put less weight on it, and I would only say that if you don't have other things to say. So for example, if you presented at a conference, please dedicate more time, space and attention to that rather than conferences you've attended. Because again, you just need to keep coming back to the question, how does this differentiate me? How does this make me attractive? And most people will have gone to some sort of student conference, like as an attendee.
Okay. I just really hope that I have actually things to write in the CV.
You will.
But it was just blank, and then I'm just trying to like make substance out of nothing.
No, you will. Everyone will. And I think it's also a really good time to mention that things should probably be in reverse chronological order. The most recent, the most salient, hence the most important things go at the top, especially for things like publications. These strawberries are delicious.
I know, right?
They're so juicy.
I know. That's why I don't like Australian strawberries. You understand me now, right?
I can't eat strawberries in Australia anymore.
I know.
Korea has ruined Australian strawberries.
That's what happens.
That's awful. That's delicious. And then the last section is the personal interest section, and this one is a little bit more mysterious in the sense that I think everyone has a different opinion on how this should be. Me personally, I put quite a bit of effort into this, and I wrote it in prose rather than dot points. And I tried to inject a little bit of my own like personality and my own humor into this, because I think it's the only section in the CV where you actually get to write actual paragraphs and show just the way you talk, and it kind of reflects a bit about your character. And so I wouldn't keep it too serious. Like I read one CV, like someone else's CV, that was like, oh, I do escape rooms, therefore I'm like really logical. I do like Rubik's cubes, therefore I love doing maths. And I think if you go too hard and do too much, then it is a little bit, it's just like a little bit like too heavy. Whereas you can keep it light and say, oh, I love rock music, I love the Western Bulldogs, I like that sort of thing, and just keep it funny and just like have one last interesting X factor.
And Richard, how long was your CV?
So my CV was 6 pages. That's the absolute maximum.
Really?
You can't game it. You can't go over 6.
Oh.
And healthcare providers will probably get really turned off if you go over 6, because they tell you that it has to be under 6 or under. So if you go over 6, like 7, then they'll just see it as a sign of like not being able to follow instructions and not doing it properly. And I think it would be a pretty big cross against you. I would try and make it 6, honestly. It can be fewer than 6 pages, but I think you really should be trying to fill in the sections to as much detail as possible and just make sure that each section is fully saturated. And like I said before, just, engage that problem solving, that resourceful part of yourself, and just think of anything that you can write, as long as it's true and accurate, to fill in those sections and make the 6.
Okay. Now we'll move on to cover letters.
Yeah.
So Richard, can you give us a spiel about it?
Yes, so cover letters are something that pretty much pretty much most hospitals will ask. Because the 8 hospitals that I applied for were all big metro hospitals like Austin, Alfred, etc. They all asked for cover letters.
Oh, so some hospitals don't?
My understanding is that not every hospital will ask for one.
Okay.
Could be wrong, but I don't think every hospital will. And here's the kicker: cover letters are extremely difficult because each hospital has their own requirement for what a cover letter should include. Their own different person to address it to, their own different address, their own different word count.
Wow.
So yeah, it's just going to be really different. And other than those like obvious differences like address, like who you address it to, the actual content should be different as well. Just because each hospital has different values, have different characters and strengths that you need to target and address.
Right, okay. So you really have to tailor each one to each hospital.
Yeah, I'd say it's very, very difficult to copy and paste entire sections or paragraphs, and I would strongly advise against it. Yeah, before we talk about that though, I think it's good to mention that a cover letter is basically you explaining why you want to go to that place and why that hospital should choose you. So why us and why you? And you write this in actual paragraph form, so there should be no dot points, no casual language or anything. It needs to be very, very professional, no abbreviations, an actual cover letter professional structure. Yeah, and the reason I said earlier why you shouldn't copy and paste is because even things like the language that hospitals use changes. So they might have like very similar values like respect, compassion or whatever, but then if you actually look at their motto and look at their About Us section, they use just different words and you need to mirror them. So use the exact same language that they're using, just to show that you truly understand. And yeah, so for example, even metro hospitals like Western versus like RMH or something, they're not even that far apart. But Western, I would definitely talk about like multiculturalism, for example, whereas RMH probably not as much. So like know whether a hospital loves its research, is defined by its research excellence, know whether, the St. V's, the Sisters of Charity, for example. So use these phrases, chuck them in, and make them as personal as possible so that the other person who's reading the cover letter is like, wow, they're like actually talking to me. Like they know this organization inside out. Like we really need this person. They're actually made for us.
Okay. That sounds even harder than the CV. Oh no.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and just one last tip about cover letters is that it needs to look like a cover letter. That's like kind of a dumb thing to say, but what I mean by that is, I think the big thing is saving space and saving words. Sometimes they ask for like a word count that's really, really little, or they say that it has to be no more than a page, and you'll find yourself trying to like like take shortcuts to try and meet that limit, or to try and fit it under a page.
Okay.
And I've seen some people just like fit in like the details, and they just like invent some new template that doesn't even look like a cover letter, and it just looks really messy and ugly, and they make that margins really wide and the font is tiny, and it just needs to actually look good.
And where do you get all this like information from about like the word count or like the values or whatever?
Yeah, that's a extremely important question. So some hospitals will have it on their website, and some hospitals will mention it in their info night. And they don't always match up. So you just need to ask a lot of questions, and if there are any inconsistencies, just email the medical workforce unit and then just confirm. And invariably, someone will ask questions about the cover letter in terms of word count, what to include, that sort of thing. So the question always gets asked and it always gets answered, so it's out there.
Okay. So we have info night for every hospital?
Yes, there is an information night. I don't know if it's every hospital, but at least the metro hospitals that I apply for, every hospital. And I think Monash even gave points to people who attended the info night. So you needed to register for the Zoom link early, and then once you get the Zoom link, actually join and attend.
Wow.
So they give you points even for attendance. As far as I'm aware, Monash was the only hospital that did that. So be organised, be prepared, start now.
Okay. Man. Hello everyone. We didn't know that this video was going to be this long, so we'll cover the second half in a separate video. So we'll see you then. Bye!